Okay, thank you. Okay, good evening everybody. If I can bring this meeting to order, thank you. And a warm welcome to those attending the Major Applications Planning Committee and to our viewers watching on the Council's YouTube channel, Hillingdon, London. My name is Councillor Steve Tuckwell and I am the Chairman of this committee. Details of the business to be considered this evening are shown on the agenda, copies of which are accessible online underneath the live broadcast. For those present in the room and intending to speak this evening, please note that you will be filmed and any statements you make will be recorded and made public. A reminder to anybody speaking today that your voice will only be audible online when the microphone is switched on. In terms of fire alarms this evening, we are not expecting a fire drill, so if the alarm does go off, please follow officers to the fire exits and out of the building to the designated meeting points. For mobile, tablet and devices, if I could request that those are switched off or at least to silent before the meeting starts so as to avoid any interruptions, but please note that councillors and officers of the committee may be using tablets or laptops during the meeting to review the agenda and associated paperwork. For those in the room this evening, welcome to the public gallery. We also have meeting feedback forms which are on the table just over there, the yellow forms, and for those watching online, meeting feedback is accessible underneath the live broadcast. Perfect timing for mobile phones. Yeah, let's hope that isn't a fire alarm.
No, it's on the phone.
Thank you. And again, a reminder: if we can switch phones to silent, that would be great. I left mine in the office; I didn't bring it with me. Okay, that's the domestic announcements and chairman's announcements. I'm now going to introduce the people that are around the table here today, starting with the voting councillors this evening. So we'll start off with Councillor Higgins, who's my vice chairman. We have Councillor Bennett. We have Councillor Davis. We have Councillor Dott. We have Councillor Gaelic and Councillor Gill. So those are the councillors who are the voting members this evening. But we're also joined and supported by a number of officers. So I'll introduce those in turn, starting with our Major and Strategic Planning Applications Manager, Mandip Malhotra. We have our Specialist Planning Manager this evening in Thine. We have Andrew Thorley, who's our Principal Planning Officer. We have Chris Bradley, who's also a Principal Planning Officer. We have our Legal Advisor this evening, Glenn Egan, and the person who keeps us all in check this evening from Democratic Services is Steve Clark, who's just sat to my left here. So that's all the introductions. So we can now start to get into the agenda this evening. And did I forget Alan Tilley? So apologies. So I will go back and say we have our Highways Officer here this evening, Alan Tilley, and welcome to you, Alan. Thank you, and apologies. Okay, we now can get into the agenda, and we will start with agenda item 1. Apologies for absence, Steve.
No apologies for absence this evening, Chairman.
Okay, thank you very much. Agenda item 2 is declarations of interest in matters coming before this meeting this evening. Have I got any declarations of interest? No. Okay, we can record that and move on. Agenda item 3 this evening is to agree the minutes of our previous meeting of the 11th of October. Can I take those as agreed? Okay, we can note those as agreed, Steve. Agenda item 4 is matters notified in advance or urgent, which there aren't any. And agenda item 5 is to confirm that this evening's meeting will be held in part 1, which is all entirely public. Again, part 2 is items which are held in private, which there aren't any. Just to advise everybody watching this evening that the agenda will be taken in the order that it is published, and we have one petition item this evening which we'll deal with when we get to that item. Okay, if we can now move on to agenda item 6, which is an HS2 application for the River Pinn Realignment, and at that note I'm going to hand over to Ian to take us through the application. Over to you, Ian.
Thank you, Chair. Item 6, so this is the land just off Merksharp Dome, site of Breakspear Road South and South Harefield. It's an HS2 application under the HS2 Act, not a town and country planning application, and it is for flood compensation area, attenuation pond, footbridge plans and various specifications for earthworks. And just in terms of the HS2 Act and what we can consider tonight, Chair and Committee, is the building works under paragraph 2, and that is and we are restricted as always with these. So in relation to building works, we can consider the design or external appearance of the building works and whether they ought to be modified to preserve the local environment or local amenity, to prevent or reduce prejudicial effects on road safety or on the free flow of traffic in the local area, to preserve a site of archaeological or historic interest or nature conservation, and is reasonably capable of being so modified. So there's two tests there. Or the development could reasonably be carried out elsewhere within the development's permitted limits. And in relation to earthworks, again, same sort of constraints to preserve the local environment, local amenity, road safety, and archaeological and nature conservation interest. And since they're not forming part of a scheduled work as notified in the Act, that again, they can be moved elsewhere. Road vehicle park, same again, same test, and then there's a couple of fences that we have constraints over, whether the alignment, but not actually the type of fence, so we can consider the alignment. Red line plan, crossing Breakspear Road South. I'll come on to the context in a bit, but this is basically where the HS2 line goes over the top of the River Pinn, over Breakspear Road South, and then into the Copthall Tunnel, which this committee considered earlier in the year. There's basically four parts to this approval. Part one is the River Pinn realignment, so it's the earthworks to facilitate that. Number two is the flood attenuation area, so a slight reduction in land levels to accommodate the runoff from the area. Number three is the gate mead attenuation pond, and number four is basically a series of ditches in between Chiltern line and the HS2 line, and then just slightly north of the HS2 line. So for some further context, the area in green was one of the first parts of the railway that this committee considered, so that's the actual West Ruislip portal. Then we considered the blue area. Now the blue and the purple area were due to be considered at the same time, but due to various design constraints and council pushback, they were decoupled. So the blue area is basically the infrastructure to take the HS2 line over River Pinn and Breakspear Road South. The purple area is basically all the works to attenuate the water and some other ancillary works. And then the orange is the Copthall Tunnel that we considered earlier in the year. And then finally, the reconfiguration of Ruislip Golf Course, which is dealt with through the Town and Country Planning Act. Aerial photo of the site. You can just about see the access road that was another part of the HS2 works, just coming up. It's up there. That was created by HS2, and the attenuation pond will go south of that. The flood compensation area, broadly, that area there, just south of Oak Farm, and then River Pinn realignment, and then the ditches all in those areas, just in between. That's as it looks roughly at the, of about 8 weeks ago, so things have probably changed substantially since then. And you can see the River Pinn just going underneath the Chiltern line at this minute. Current layout, you can see the basic alignment of HS2, where it will cross the River Pinn there, and then Breakspear Road South. Flood compensation areas under the label marked Temporary Hall Road Bridge, just in there, and that is where the attenuation pond is going, just south of the new access track into the Merksharp Dome facility. So, broadly speaking, that's the general arrangement. There's a little green area in there as well, which I'll come on to in due course. So in terms of number one, the River Pinn realignment, see the existing alignment marked by the red arrow. It needs to be realigned to get it underneath HS2 line. Now, just north of this is currently a haul road, which you would have seen on that alignment there. That haul road was originally straight through, and that prevented proper realignment of River Pinn, but officers worked with HS2 to secure a slight change to that alignment of the haul road outside Act limits into the council-owned golf course land, and that enabled us to secure a better alignment of the River Pinn, which is now before us. So this application first came to the council 2018, and it's only once we were happy with that change. We didn't want the temporary works impacting the permanent works that the residents would be left with. So we moved the temporary works, that's the haul road, and that allowed us to realign the River Pinn so it swings out further from the HS2 line, goes more at a right angle, and that allows us to get a better footpath and a better pedestrian right-of-way through the HS2 bridge and then under the Chiltern Line bridge. And you can just see the scale of works there. You see the existing land level there, which is the dotted line just across. You can see roughly where the River Pinn is at the minute, and the change to the landscape, and you can see the big wing wall there. And because we've been able to swing the River Pinn further away, that enables us to give a wider space here, so we can get better landscaping in next to the wing wall to protect it from graffiti, and also to clean it up if it does get graffitied. Moving on to the footbridge over the River Pinn. So there is currently a footbridge. It's in a bit of a poor state, but because it's been realigned, they've taken out the existing bridge and they'll be putting in a new one. Officers have worked closely with HS2 to secure what we consider to be a bridge that is fitting of the area, fairly subtle, nice archway on it, and will be maintained by our Green Spaces team under arrangements with HS2. Number 2, the flood attenuation area. So basically, when they built the embankments and all the wing walls to carry HS2 over River Pinn and Breakspear Road South, that takes up quite a lot of land where floodwater would normally go. That floodwater would probably end up in the River Pinn and then out the River Pinn again and in people's property. So HS2 has to construct a no net loss. So this flood compensation area results in no net loss and maintaining the status quo. Status quo is not ideal on Breakspear Road South and in the area for those who know it, but just to be clear that some of the drainage work in this area has been improved. In particular, there's a culvert that runs underneath Breakspear Road South that was considered to be, that was thought to be 375mm diameter. It turned out to be a lot less than that, but nonetheless it's been replaced with that larger size culvert, so that should help improve the flood situation in the area. This is flood compensation area on day 1 of opening. That's what it's supposed to look like from HS2, and then 15 years after opening, and it will, I can't guarantee it will look exactly like that with those flowers in exactly the same place as that photo shared, but you'll get the rough idea of what we're trying to achieve here. In terms of flood compensation area, this is the flood map, 1 in 100-year flood event plus climate change, so you can see the compensation area working hard to keep the water away from going into the Pinn. You'll notice that the areas that are shown to be flooded, basically the golf course land, not the properties, and that keeps flood water out of the Pinn, which ultimately comes out further down south on Breakspear Road. On to 3, flood attenuation pond. So the access tracking just to the north of that. Again, this flood attenuation pond is required to keep water from going into the River Pinn. A lot of work in the flood area associated with the scheme. So this is basically taking that flood water that's been displaced by the embankments and so on, and it will go on into this area and then discharge under Breakspear Road South and those improved culverts that I talked about, and then you can see the swale on the other side of Breakspear Road South, which takes it to the other flood compensation area. So all in all, there is some betterment, not a great deal. There is an area of land just to the south of this which the council has secured for flood betterment, and we're working with HS2. So in the round in this area, HS2 will ultimately result in a much better situation for our residents, but not as part of this planning application that's before you tonight. The area in green is a proposed access road by HS2. HS2 built this access road to the north to service the MSD facility. They didn't secure access rights over the top of it, so in order to get maintenance tracks to their attenuation pond, they proposed building another road, and we said that's ridiculous. So we've told them that we wouldn't be approving that. So work is ongoing at the minute to secure access across the road that they'd already built, with the road vehicle park basically at this side. Having another access point off Breakspear Road South, north of the new HS2 line and the Chiltern line would be considered somewhat risky, given all those, given the problems on that road network already. So that's not before this committee for approval. That's being reserved for a later stage. So all that green area is reserved for a later stage. And then for is just the earthworks to create the drainage ditches and dikes either side of the HS2 line, which will take the water, convey the water into the flood attenuation areas and ultimately into the River Pinn. So in terms of the recommendation from officers, it's approval, no conditions. As I said, we worked quite hard to get this to a level where we're comfortable bringing it before this committee. We've worked hard to secure a better alignment of the River Pinn. It was our suggestion for HS2 to go and move their Hall Road, which they couldn't really do unless this council gave them permission to eat back into the golf course. So that was good, and they received that, and that's a welcome change to the scheme. We've had improvements to the attenuation pond as well on Gatemead. We didn't like a rather large concrete retaining wall structure, so we've had that softened, so that's now an embanked area next to a right-of-way. So we've made changes through the design process that we didn't need to enforce conditions or change plans through this committee tonight. So as far as the recommendation goes, it's approval with no conditions. And just to note, the final landscape details will come through at a later date through the land restoration bringing to use proposals. The Environment Agency permits the final hydrological impacts of the river, so the flood waters, the amount of water that goes into the River Pinn. That's effectively signed off by the Environment Agency. It's in their remit. So works for the additional maintenance access route off Breakspear Road South. That will come at a later date as well. Final plans for the right-of-way connections, including crossing Breakspear Road South, remain under discussion, and whether that needs to be a traffic-lit crossing for pedestrians, push a button and then they can cross, as opposed to the fairly free-for-all at the minute, which is a pretty dangerous crossing. And Area 31 is the area I talked about where we've secured flood betterment. So that will come at some point in the future as well. So there we go, Chair. Recommendation, approval, no conditions. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Ian. And as this committee knows, we've had a few of these applications now for new members of this committee, indeed. A very technical subject that Ian has unravelled for us, but there's a lot of information I appreciate for members to take on board. So there's no speaking rights for HS2 applications. So we're not going to quite go to members' questions yet, because I'm going to invite Glenn, our Head of Legal Services, to give us, to build on what Ian's talked about from a technical perspective, but just to give us a legal overview as to what this committee can and can't do.
Yes, thank you, Chairman. As always, the committee's room for manoeuvre here is very limited by the legislation. The first thing I'd ask members to consider is whether they believe they have sufficient information to make a decision tonight. You've had the benefit of a very full report and presentation, so members are satisfied. There's then two paragraphs which I can refer you to, which would give grounds for refusal or imposing a condition. The first is paragraph 2 relating to building works. As I set out in the legal implications on page 26, there are no objections on any of those grounds, so I don't believe that there's a possibility for the council to refuse or impose a condition relating to paragraph 2. In relation to paragraph 3, the earthworks, as you've heard there, officers have secured a number of improvements from HS2 in relation to those works, and the main difficulty here is there's no other location at which those works can be carried out in order for the development to proceed. So again, I can't advise committee if there's any grounds for refusal there or imposing any condition, Chairman. Thank you.
Okay, no, thank you for that, Glenn. And I think, again, just to reiterate, and it was touched on in Ian's presentation, the amount of work that officers go into in preparing the ground, should I say, pardon the pun, but preparing the situation for us so it's ready for us to determine. So there's a lot of work that goes into that. So thanks to officers for doing that pre-work. Okay, right, over to members to debate this application, and I've got Councillor Higgins who indicated.
Thank you, Chairman. I know Ian stated that the landscaping will come back to the committee, but just as a point of interest, can we make sure that the trees that are going to be replaced are mature trees, and we do also do the to make sure that they are looked after us for a certain period of time. I know that will come back, but I just want to make sure that we get that in now.
I think, again, paraphrasing, is mature trees and a maintenance plan to come back at some point.
Yes, thanks, Chair. So all the works that HS2 do to restore the area has to be maintained initially before it's handed over with maintenance agreements with landowners. So the flood compensation area, for example, the intention at this stage is that the HS2 Limited Secretary of State effectively will retain that land, and therefore they will have to look after it. And all the other landscaping, if it's passed back to a different landowner, will be under instructions through the deeds of the property and all the rest legal requirements to keep that landscaping in perpetuity, or it's required to be maintained by HS2 Limited or whoever the final operator of the railway is.
Did you want to come back on that, Councillor Higgins?
Yes, Chairman. Yeah, I appreciate all that. We've been through that one before. It's just that it's a flood area, and I just want to make sure that the trees are very mature, so they will not be their roots will not be waterlogged, and we do have something that's different courses for different courses, as it were. So that's all I'm really concerned about, to be quite honest. Thank you.
Okay. Thank you very much. Councillor Davis, you indicated.
Thank you, Chairman. My only concern was on lighting in the area. Have we completed a lighting survey? Because I couldn't see, it might be in the report, but I couldn't see it. I would just worry with pedestrian rights of way, there didn't seem to be any lighting.
You okay to pick that one up?
Yes, thank you, Chair. Thank you, Councillor. So there's no lighting associated with this permission. We are currently investigating the rights of way and the way that it's going to be restored in this area, because obviously we want more people to be using this. We've secured new rights of way up to the northern sustainable placement area. We've secured a right of way through the southern sustainable placement area that we've already brought to these committees. So we're hoping for more footfall, at which point we'll obviously have to consider the lighting arrangements. But that's not before this committee, but I will take that back to our rights of way officer and make sure that that is picked up in those further discussions.
Okay. That's it, thank you.
Okay. Thank you, Councillor. Councillor Dott.
Thank you, Chair. As Glenn mentioned, due to HS2 legislation, we can't do much about this application because Council is under no obligation to determine the application unless we have sufficient information. I don't see any reasons to reject or impose extra condition on this, so I'm happy if my colleagues are there to propose a officer recommendation. Thank you.
Okay. No, thank you, Councillor Dott. So we are moved by Councillor Dott. Any other members indicating willingness to speak? No. Okay. Just a reminder then, we are moved. We need to be seconded to move this one on. Anyone want to take us forward on that? Councillor Higgins?
As you know, I'm such a big fan of this scheme, but yeah, I will second it with my heart reservation.
Okay, duly noted, Councillor. Okay, we are moved and seconded. I'm not seeing any other members indicate they wish to speak, so at that point we can take a vote for officer's recommendation in agenda item 6 this evening. Can I have a show of hands, please? Okay, so that's 7 out of 7, unanimous. So agenda item 6 this evening is approved. Thank you very much, everybody. Okay, right, we can now move on to our petition item this evening, which is agenda item 7, the Elms, 371A High Street, Harlington. Now, this is a petition item, so there are prescribed speaking rights this evening, so we've got quite a lot of people here this evening, so welcome. So the speaking rights are for the applicant, for the petitioner, and for ward councillors. I can see a couple of ward councillors here this evening as well. And there are prescribed times for speaking, and when we get there I'll work out how, I'll let you know how the traffic light system in front of me works. So, as I said, that when we get to that point, but we'll hear from officers first. So agenda item 7, who's taking us out on this one? It's going to be Chris. So over to you, Chris.
Thank you, Chairman. Item 7 relates to the demolition of the existing buildings and structures at the Elms site, which is 371A High Street, Harlington, and the construction of new buildings to provide 2,116 square metres of flexible use class EG3, B2 and B8 use with associated access, service areas and car parking and soft landscaping. Almost the entire site is located within the Greenbelt, with further open Greenbelt land to the east. Residential properties abut the boundary to the south and to the west, which is where the existing access road to the site is located. There are also some residential garages which immediately abut the entrance to the site. The site is understood to accommodate circa 3,313 square metres of Class EG3, B2 and B8 floor space, plus 4,132 square metres of hard standing or developed land, and a residential dwelling to the north formerly used by the veterinarian staff who occupied one of the commercial buildings to the south. I'll just walk you through some of the plans. You'll see the site here marked in red. Okay. Here is the open greenbelt land I mentioned to the east, residential properties to the west and to the south. This plan is a constraints plan which indicates the extent of the greenbelt, covered in green. Some existing elevations and sections. This plan will indicate the initial proposal. So the applicants worked quite proactively with the local authority to reduce the quantum of development, which I'll go into in more detail in a moment, but that plan there shows you a site proposal for which came into us initially. This plan shows you a revised master plan, which indicates a significantly less development in the northern parcel of the site. This is a proposed site plan. First floor plan indicating the makeup of the internal space to the north. The same for the building to the south. Proposed roof plan. Roof plan of the building to the north. One for the south. Here you see some proposed building elevations. Another look at some elevations. Site sections and elevations again. Building sections. A planting plan which indicates some additional planting and mitigation around the edges of the site, and some schematic elevations. Here's just a quick plan which shows the level of development which was initially proposed in comparison to what is now being proposed before the committee today. So this is the initial proposal, and this is what we have to make a decision on today. There's some key views here which have been taken out of the land visual impact assessment, and these key views extend across the greenbelt towards the site. You'll note the outline of the building. I know it's not probably a great view, but the outline of the building is in purple here, in purple here, and in purple here. I'll do the same on this screen. Purple there, there, and also there. There are more key views within the land visual impact assessment, but those ones are considered to be the key views which impact the greenbelt. Here's a bird's eye view of how the site looks at the moment. Some images of the garages which line the front. You'll notice the access road is here and here on this. This is a view looking towards the entrance to the site, which is here and here. You'll note some parking along this section here. This parking is actually illegal parking spaces. They're not permitted to be there. You've got one of the buildings to the front. This is the western boundary with a small proportion of the residential dwelling shown there. It's one of the existing buildings which actually bounds the site towards the open greenbelt land just beyond the eastern boundary. A view of the existing residential property within the northern section of the site. The vet's building. These are actually some of the old sheds which were on site, which you can now see the state of them. They're dilapidated, they've fallen down. This is probably what you would have found in that section of the site. So you can see how much of a disrepair those have fallen into, and they're not usable. This is the eastern boundary. Just beyond here, you've got some very mature trees which are proposed to be retained. and this is a CGI of the building to the south. As you will note from the comparison plan, a significant amount of work has been undertaken by the applicant to reduce the scale of development. In accordance with the MPPF, applications which propose development within the Greenbelt must demonstrate that the proposal is either appropriate development by meeting one or more of these exceptions within paragraph 149 of the MPPF, or that very special circumstances exist. Whilst the proposal would result in a reduction in floor space, it is the volume of the proposed built form which needs to be considered when assessing the potential impact upon the openness of the Greenbelt. The proposal would result in an increase in built volume of approximately 7,500 cubic metres. To assist the Council's assessment of the impact upon the Greenbelt, the applicant has submitted a land visual impact assessment which demonstrates that there would be very limited change to the key views from within and outside of the Greenbelt. As such, officers consider that the proposal would conform with paragraph 149 exception C, which states that development will be considered appropriate where the proposal is not considered to be disproportionate to the existing built form. Therefore, the applicant is not required to demonstrate that very special circumstances exist. Notwithstanding this point, the applicant has provided details of the benefits of the proposal which would result in an increase in the employment from approximately 17 FTE to 50 FTE. The state of the current buildings, as shown in those images, is an eyesore within the Greenbelt. Therefore, their replacement would be considered an improvement. Furthermore, as noted within the case officer report, the delivery of development within the Hayes housing zone, which is close by, has seen a decline in the availability of Class E, G3, B2 and B8 floor space within this area, which makes up approximately 91% of Hillingdon's economy. This scheme would therefore assist with replacing some of that floor space which has been lost, and this has drawn support from the Council's Partnerships and Business Engagement Manager. Finally, as indicated on the proposed master plan, the layout has been amended to include a greater element of landscaping to the north of the site and along the eastern boundary where the section of the site extends slightly further into the Greenbelt, and this will feature a pond and soft landscaping to help integrate this section of the open land to help integrate this section with the open land beyond the Greenbelt boundary. These benefits are considered to outweigh the potential limited harm to the openness of the Greenbelt. Therefore, the proposal would conform to the relevant national, regional and local Greenbelt policies. Officers have considered that the comments made by residents and those contained within the petition, which has been submitted in objection to the proposal. Officers must also take into consideration the applicant's fallback position, which in this case would be to operate an open storage facility from within the site, which could be undertaken within its existing use class and without the requirement of planning permission. This would have a much greater impact upon the residential amenities of local residents and also the Greenbelt. The supporting documents, which include a 72-hour noise assessment, have been reviewed by the relevant specialists who have raised no objection to the proposal, subject to the agreement of appropriate on-site and off-site mitigation measures, which are to be secured either by appropriately worded conditions or within a proposed legal agreement. In terms of transport, I would like to provide a verbal update on this item to members. A revised transport assessment was submitted in response to the officer's initial comments and included a reduction in the number of car parking spaces from 36 to 31. The transport assessment included a revised site plan illustrating these changes and therefore contradicts a number of parking spaces illustrated in the master plan and planting plan. As such, a revised planting plan and master plan will be secured via condition 4, which is the landscaping condition in your officer's report pack, and condition 4 part 2D is to be amended to reflect the correct number of parking space, which is 31. Condition 2, the approved plans condition shall be amended to include the updated site plan, which illustrates 31 spaces and not 36. I'll just make it clear to members what spaces that relates to. It is only a minor change, which essentially is these spaces here being removed, and on this one it is these spaces here. Considering all these points, the application is recommended for approval, subject to conditions and an appropriately worded legal agreement. Thank you, Chairman.
Okay, thank you very much for that, Chris. We have an addendum on this item as well, don't we? Did you want to make reference to that?
Apologies, there is a very minor change to the addendum, which includes the insertion of the standard wording C, which is the relating to the review work which may need to be undertaken, D, which is the officers being authorised to negotiate and agree detailed terms, and E, if the legal agreement has not been finalised by a specific date. Thank you, Chairman.
Thank you. Mandy, did you want to come in on any points there, or?
I think we'll wait to hear from the members, from petitioners, but there is a fallback at this application site, and the scheme before us is considered to be a better solution. So we will happily address members' concerns and residents when they speak. Thank you.
Okay. Thank you. Okay, right. As I said a bit earlier on, this is a petition item, and as per the Council's constitution, we have some prescribed speaking rights. For those in the room and for those watching, that is 5 minutes speaking for petitioners. That's 5 minutes speaking for the applicant or agent. Sorry, but ward councillors only get 3 minutes. That's the nature of the constitution. So we're at the point now where I can invite. Is it Parmi Singh? Okay. If you'd like to come to the front there, Mr. Singh, that would be great. So I'll let you get comfortable. So you'll see in front of you a microphone with a little button on it. When you press that button, the lights in front of me will light up. You get 4 minutes on green, 1 minute on amber, and when it goes to red, I will very, very politely bring you to a stop. But I'm sure you've practiced, and you will be within the time. Also, at the end of your 5 minutes, or however long you take, I'm going to open it up for members to maybe ask you some questions. Okay? So, you okay with that? Yeah, fine. So when you press the button, Steve here will press his button.
Hi, Chairman, councillors and planning officers. I have been nominated to speak on behalf of the residents in the immediate vicinity of the Elms, of which 50 residents in 2 days have signed a petition recommending the planning application be rejected, and that's in 2 days. This is a classic example of a textbook planning application being recommended by the council as boxes have been ticked without taking the reality of the environment and residential nature of the environment into account. Reports have been done by agencies in silos versus looking at this development in a holistic way. Some observations. We are not against the development of the site. We are not in support of this development. This is an industrial scale commercial development occurring nearly a large residential and greenbelt area. Existing use of the site consisted of vets, farm shop, pet shop, meat merchant, etc., i.e. local businesses. We feel that smaller businesses operating on the site are beneficial to the local area, in equilibrium with the area, without causing harm or blight. We feel that the redevelopment of this site, smaller in scale, into smaller units, controlled use, will be highly beneficial to the local economy. It's a shame the proposal does not reflect this. With the third runway project potentially shelved, demand for storage facilities potentially capped. There are plenty of empty units around Stockley Park, Heathrow and Hayes, with further units in the pipeline. These have correct surrounding road infrastructure. The development will not benefit the local area as implied. With the proposed expansion of the ULEZ to Greater London and COP27 commitments, focus should be on reducing pollution. We should not be adding traffic to the highway, but reducing it, especially HGVs in and around residential areas. Why should it be refused? The consultation was very poor with little engagement. 50 plus residents have signed a petition in 2 days against this development, as evidenced by me speaking here today. I'm sure there would have been more if we had more time. Large units being built at this site are not in keeping with the environment. The units will be overlooking greenbelt area, screening provision made, number of houses and flats where no or little screening provision is made, as mentioned by the planning officer. Focus was on the greenbelt area, not the adjoining properties, which are residential in nature, and especially adjoining property 398 High Street. The access into the site via Cranford Lane is a contentious issue. Highways officers will tell you of a numerous number of accidents on that stretch of road. It is a narrow lane with poor access and lights. The access into the site via Harlington High Street is also not very clear. Residents on the High Street have on their deeds their rights to park outside the access to the site, which has been classed as illegal parking within this session. something the developers don't agree with. Large lorries dropping goods to the local co-op once a day cause chaos on the high street. Why do I mention this? Well, there is a bus stop on the opposite side to the site access on the high street. This will become a choke point when buses stop, resulting in gridlock and tailbacks driven by increased volume and size of traffic turning into the Elms. Parking bays being used by the garages and maisonettes along the access to the site will be gone. This will increase further pressure on existing residential parking bays. Larger HGV vehicles also cause more air and noise pollution in an already polluted area. Noise on the site will also affect local residents. HSSC devices fitted to vehicles will make this work, i.e. reversing measures on the HGV vehicles. The units are being built too close to houses, resulting in light pollution from the site security lighting that will inevitably be introduced. Conditions that should be agreed if the developments go ahead. Hours of operation. Site opening should be limited to 8 to 5 Monday to Friday, 9 to 12 Saturday, and no use on Sunday, to ensure that noise pollution impact to residents is limited. Please note, this site, there are residents adjoining this site, not just greenbelt land, and it's quite densely populated in terms of the surrounding properties, maisonettes and some houses. A gated site with a person responsible for site usage. A banksman, responsible person on site who will guide vehicles safely in and out of the site. Size of the vehicle should be limited to no more than 3.5 tonne. Vehicles exceeding this will be detrimental to the local roads in terms of safety and air quality. Tree screening near the houses, not just the greenbelt, and along the side of the adjoining property, 389 High Street. Screening should mirror the size of the units, i.e. 8.6 metres when planted, so mature trees. No vehicles entering the site should wait on the residential roads, slip roads in the local area. To date, HGVs have been waiting to gain access to the site, causing congestion and lack of parking for the residents of that slip road. Thank you for your time.
Okay, thank you, and we've time to spare. Thank you. Right, as I said, members may have some questions for you, so I'm just going to pause and see if any members have got any questions. Councillor Bennett.
Thank you very much. Not an easy thing to do. Just a quick question was, so do you live near the site, within the vicinity?
Yes, I don't have a marker, but yeah, I'm just trying to work out the bearings of the site. If you go to, so I live, so that's the site. I live here, and that's 389 High Street, and there's no, as you can see, at the moment there's lianos trees here, which block that view, and as you can see on the other proposals, the bird's eye view, there's very little trees. So effectively, it opens it up completely. And I think if you look at the picture kind of view, you'll see kind of a bit more clear. Here. Oh, if you go back one, please. Yeah. So that's 389, and that's my house here. And at the moment, all this is screened off, as you can see, and all that's going to go. So we'll see directly into the units.
Thank you.
Okay, any other...
And that's not to mention all the other properties in front.
Any other questions from members? Councillor Gill.
Thank you, Chair. Just looking at the entrance for where the lorries will go in.
Yes.
I'm trying to envisage a situation where there's a lorry trying to come out and a lorry waiting to go in.
Yes.
How do you see that panning out?
Yeah, so could you just go back to the pictures where you've got the cars parked? Please. That one here. So I can't see it. And this parking, which was called legal, it's not actually, because within the deeds of the residents of the Masonettes, they've got rights to park there. So not in that way, but they have got rights to park there. And I can't see how you would allow, a heavy goods vehicle to, get access in a clear way, because there's a slip road on this side of the Toyota, and they end up parking there and unloading there. That's what tends to happen today. And it will just get worse because it's going to be a storage facility catering for HGV vehicles.
Okay. Any other questions? No. Well, lots of points were captured there. I can assure you, and we'll be addressing those when we get onto the next part. But on behalf of the committee, thank you for addressing us this evening. And if you can turn your mic off, you can make your way back. Thank you. Okay. Right. To balance things off, we now have the opportunity for the applicant or agent. I've got Ben Kelway. Is that right? Okay, Ben. If you'd like to come to the... So that the committee has equal time to hear from both sides of the conversation. you get the same 5 minutes. Again, when you press the button on there, the green light will come on. You get 4 minutes, followed by 1 minute at amber, and then when we get to red, I will again politely bring you to a halt. So when you're ready, you can press the button and take us through.
So evening everybody. Thank you, Chair, members, for the opportunity to speak this evening. I'm Ben Kelway from Lichfield's Planning Consultants. We're the agents on the application. I'll keep my comments here relatively brief. The committee report is obviously very comprehensive and robust and really resolutely recommends approval. So the scheme before you at the Elms is the culmination of several years of work. The applicant, my client, has engaged closely with officers and with the GLA from the pre-application stage and throughout determination over the last couple of years. We've improved the scheme to ensure its local benefits can be maximised whilst working hard to mitigate against all potential impacts. In particular, as the officer's presentation has illustrated, the application was fundamentally amended in September, and the development now actually provides a reduction in floor space at the site, significant additional landscaping, planting of some 76 new trees and hedgerows, and an improved layout which focuses on the previously developed land. So the development will replace the dilapidated existing buildings and hard surfaces that you've seen on the images this evening with a new, higher quality, fit-for-purpose workspace development. The committee report refers to 17 existing employees at the site, but actually the existing buildings are failing and are currently being vacated. So there are actually now no permanent employees at the site, and the remaining businesses will have left completely by the end of the year. So in place of these low-grade existing buildings, which are soon to be vacant, the scheme will introduce high-spec new buildings meeting modern standards. They're designed for local small businesses, and they'll provide around 50 local jobs. These are significant local benefits, and we're pleased to see that the scheme's economic and employment attributes are described as laudable in the committee report. We've, of course, discussed the development's greenbelt impacts at length with officers. The development now reduces the built footprint of the site compared to what's there at the moment, and it will confine the buildings to the previously developed land. It will introduce significant screening both to the greenbelt but also in relation to neighbouring residential properties. The impacts on the greenbelt have been tested and fully evidenced through verified views and a landscape and visual impact assessment, and as officers have confirmed, the amended scheme constitutes acceptable development in the greenbelt, so meets the requirements of the MPPF. We've obviously heard from neighbouring objectors in relation to transport, parking, noise and screening issues. I'll take as many of those points in turn with the remaining time, and obviously here to answer any questions you may have as well. Firstly, in terms of transport, the development will in fact reduce trip generation levels compared to the established use. So if the existing buildings with the additional floor space in the baseline condition were fully occupied, the levels of trip generation would actually be higher than with the proposed development in place. The access arrangements from the High Street have been carefully assessed. There's a significant package of access improvements and active travel zone measures which will be secured through the Section 106, so that the proposed arrangements will be far superior in terms of access, highway safety and the practicalities of serving and deliveries than currently exist. As is noted in the officer's report, any third-party parking in the forecourt area flanking the access point is unlawful and can be enforced against, so this is not a reason for resisting the scheme. In terms of noise, the site's already occupied by established industrial and distribution uses. The new buildings will be higher spec with better acoustic insulation. They'll be positioned further from neighbours, and the scheme will also reduce potential vehicle movements. The development's been accompanied by a full noise assessment. Officers are comfortable with noise impacts, and conditions and obligations are in place to ensure acoustic targets are met. Turning to trees and screening, the scheme will introduce high-grade new mature specimens, 76 native trees, native hedgerows. It will enhance biodiversity and urban greening, and the new planting will help screen the buildings both from the greenbelt and in relation to neighbours. Again, the application is supported by a tree assessment and ecology assessment, which are both endorsed by officers. So we're firmly comfortable that the concerns raised by objectors have been fully addressed, but more importantly, this is also the view of your officers. So in conclusion, from me, The development is the product of a very constructive process of engagement with officers. The issues addressed have all been addressed through the evidence submitted and through amendments to the scheme. The development will deliver considerable benefits. It constitutes almost £8 million worth of investment in Harlington. Officers have secured
draw you to a close there.
a package of £600,000 of Section 106
Thank you.
measures, so we'd encourage you to
I'll bring you to
support the
a
recommendation.
polite close. Thank you.
Thank you. Sorry if I overran. But any questions?
A few seconds there,
that I can field?
Won't hold that against you. Okay. Right. Any questions from members? Councillor Davis, followed by Councillor Higgins.
Thank you, Chairman. Can you just let me know what the current operation times on the site are? Do you know?
They're unrestricted, so
there's no restrictions.
There's no restrictions at the moment. The former occupants included a veterinary surgery which operated 24 hours, and the London Meat Company which had early morning deliveries. So there are absolutely no restrictions on.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Higgins.
Thank you, Chairman. Just a couple of questions. Let's talk about what type of businesses do you envision using this new development?
Well, we've had some advice from an agent who specialises in the local market, and the nature of the accommodation is designed to be adaptable, but really to support local small and medium-sized businesses, which, as the officer's presentation highlighted, constitute some 90% of local businesses. There's a huge shortfall of accommodation in this immediate area for those sorts of operations, and the development will deliver 50 or so jobs, we think, for small and medium-sized businesses, so a real local benefit.
Yeah, you're not really answering my question. What I'm trying to ascertain, is it going to be software companies, or is it going to be industrial units, is it going to be packaging companies? What type of things do you envision? Obviously, when you've done your business plan, you must have envisioned what type of businesses
it's flexible space for all of those things.
Yeah.
There aren't any specific end users in place at this stage.
Okay.
So it's flexible, adaptable accommodation as is encouraged by your policy
Okay.
to allow them to be occupied in terms of in the long
My
term.
second question is regarding the parking there. Obviously, we have the petitioner says that they're allowed to park there. What is who owns that bit of land?
So my instruction, my understanding is that the freeholder who owns that land doesn't allow third-party parking. There's signage in place. The only reason the cars are parked there at the moment is because it isn't enforced against, but with the new development in place, it will be enforced against, basically.
Okay, thank you very much.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you. I've got Councillor Dott, followed by Councillor Bennett.
Thank you, Chairman. I have a question about screening, like petitioner just mentioned. Next to is a boundary. It's a shared boundary.
Yes.
As you mentioned, 76 trees and hedges need to be planted.
Yes.
My question is, why is it important to remove the existing mature trees from the shared boundary and replace with the new one? Is it not possible to save those mature trees?
Where the mature trees can be preserved, they will be. There's some poor specimens on the site which need to be replaced. Some of the trees within the central portions of the site need to be removed and replaced to allow the development to come forward. But there's a significant, so there are trees that are being lost, but there's a significant 5- or 6-fold increase in the number of trees being planted, and all of this will be secured through a landscaping condition. So in light of the petitioner's comments, we would be very happy to commit to delivering those trees, both to screen the impacts from the green belt, but also in relation to the screening of neighbouring properties. And obviously officers and the council will have complete control of that process through the discharge of conditions. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much. I've got Councillor Bennett, and then we've got Councillor Gill soon after.
Thank you, Chairman. My question kind of builds on Councillor Dott's point just around screening, and this slide up actually is probably the most pertinent to look at. So to the petitioner's point around screening on the south boundary, when you look in comparison to other parts of the site, it does look a little light. Have you exhausted all of the sort of screening opportunities possible? Because I'm guessing obviously it's in quite close proximity to the building. That may be the reason
It is,
Why?
but there are. This is an indicative plan, and the details will be secured by condition. So there is certainly scope for additional screening along that boundary, and yes, that could be achieved. Obviously, where the trees are in close proximity to the building line, it's more limited. But at that bottom, the left-hand corner of the image, where that gap exists, then certainly scope for additional planting there.
Thank you.
And happy to commit to that.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Gill.
Thank you, Chair. Just a couple of questions regarding access and potential businesses that might move in there.
Sure.
The first one is, are you aware of the largest size of truck that's already been to the site?
I'm not specifically aware of the dimensions of the truck, so I haven't got that information to hand, I'm afraid. It has been assessed in the transport assessment. What the transport assessment shows, as I mentioned, is that there will be a net reduction overall, and I think there's a maximum of a single HGV a day visiting the site, so accessing and leaving the site, but I'm afraid I don't have to hand the
Just to follow up on that, because the concern I've got is the access to the site. Sure. And potential vehicle leaving the site, because it could cause massive gridlock on the Harlington High Street. And my worry is that could tail back down to the Bath Road, which is a single lane because of the bus restrictions there as well. So it's just potential problems that I envisage from the narrow roads that are around the area.
Well, there's a package of measures in place in terms of those access arrangements, including widening the crossover onto the street, so that there isn't a conflict with the junction adjacent to the site in terms of the giveaway lines next to the site, which have been discussed with highways officers and secured. Improvements to surface treatments, and again, alongside the number of trips and the frequency of those trips, certainly the advice that we've had from our transport consultant, and I gather this is agreed with the highways officers, is that those movements can be comfortably accommodated in terms of the highway network.
And just a second question, which is totally different to this one. Just potential businesses that could move there. My worry is there could be a mass scale double glazing company, for example, who use heavy machinery, noisy machinery, and might operate outside social hours. Is there anything in your business plan that restricts certain industries moving in?
There isn't, but we're replicating the existing uses that are established at the site. So there would be nothing to prevent those sorts of uses from occupying the existing site. What I would say is that the nature of the accommodation that's proposed is sort of geared towards smaller enterprises, so they're not geared towards those sort of larger scale, noisy, heavy industrial uses. They're targeted towards sort of small and medium-sized businesses, but no, there's nothing to restrict specific uses within the use classes framework that we have to work within.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Any other members? Councillor Garrett.
Do you have any idea what kind of waste those businesses will generate and how often the waste would be collected from those sites?
So there are dedicated waste facilities within each of the units. The layout of the scheme has been designed to accommodate waste collection, so the refuse collection vehicles can enter the site and leave the site in forward gear in line with the relevant standards. There would be, I gather, private refuse collection, and that would need to be agreed in due course, so we don't have specific details yet at this stage, and that would be secured post-planning through a separate private contract.
So the collections would be more than once a week?
The collections could be more than once a week, but again, there's a reduction in floor space compared to what's there at the moment, so there would be a reduction in terms of the number of waste vehicle movements and vehicle movements generally compared to the site as established operating at full capacity. Thank you.
Okay. I'm not seeing any other members indicate. So, again, on behalf of the committee, thank you for addressing us this evening and answering our questions. Thank you, Mr. Kelway. If you can return to your seats. And we'll move on to, I can see we have a ward councillor, or two ward councillors here, so I think Councillor Nelson is listed down here to speak. So, Councillor Nelson, as an established councillor, you know how this all works. You only get 3 minutes, unfortunately. So it's 2 minutes on green, 1 minute on amber, and then, like everybody else, I'll bring you to a very polite end after your 3 minutes. So when you're ready to start, we'll start the clock.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'm here to support our residents, and I totally support everything that the lead petitioner said. I've got some concerns that was raised by the developer in regards to access and in regards to the and those are our main concern more than anything else. He's stating that the part where the residents' parking are is illegal. It's not. Residents has got the deeds to that parking, so how can it be illegal? And that needs to be taken into consideration. I don't know whether there was a visit, a site visit to ascertain that, but from the papers and what was discussed, a site visit was done. So obviously that would have been made known, but I don't know how comes that the area is marked down or seen as illegal parking when residents has got a deed for that. So surely that should be looked into. The other thing is, it's stated that the occupancy at the moment, the area is 24 hours. It's not. There is a vet, yes, 24 hours. The other area that the other businesses that occupy the site or used to occupy the site is starting time is from 8 till 5 p.m. and that I'm fully aware of. In regards to the access, where the access is, can you go back onto this slide for me where the cars are parked and also the entrance from Cranford Lane as well? I don't know if you've got that up on the thing, but that particular area there where the car is parked, you said they're going to extend. That means if they're extended out, there's the car parking on the main road there. There's going to be a loss of a car parking on that area. It still does not give enough access for heavy goods vehicle to come in. And if you're stating that HGV vehicles go onto the site, they don't. A small little vans goes onto the site there presently, not a heavy goods vehicles. In regards to the access area from Cranford Lane, it's a very high-risk area at the moment. We get lots of accidents happening there regularly. And the site where it's going to go in, it's very narrow. You cannot get a heavy goods vehicle through that site either. So where they're saying that's enough facilities for vehicle access, it's not. And the congestion that is going to cause on the high road is going to be massive. It's a very narrow road as it is at the present time. Can you imagine with heavy goods vehicle coming and going, public transport coming and going, and residents coming and going, what's going to happen in that area? It's just open for a total disaster. We fully support the development, but not the development that they're proposing. We're not. And that is why we're here to give that support to our residents. And please take that into consideration.
Okay, thank you. And you must have practiced that, because it was bang on 3 minutes. So well done.
Thank you.
Okay, before you go, any questions for Councillor Nelson? No? Okay. Thank you very much, Councillor. If you could just turn the button off. Right. Where do we go for this one? So committee members, we've heard a lot of information. We've heard from the officers, we've heard from the lead petitioner, we've heard from the applicant, and we've also heard from the ward councillor. There is an awful lot of information that we've got to take into account, because we were given quite an extensive list by the lead petitioner, and we need to be addressing those points through our conversation now. So I am going to open it up for debate. I can see Councillor Higgins followed by Councillor Davis.
Yeah, I think it would be benefit for the committee if officers would answer some of those questions. I know that a lot of the stuff is in the report, but I think it'd be better for us as members officers to pick up on the access, the parking, and all the other questions that there was mentioned about the landline and the trees and everything else. And then from there, I think we could probably come to a better conclusion.
Yeah, I know Mandip's got scribbling away, and there's been some conversations, I'm sure you're aware of, to try and pick up some of these points as we go, so we can address the concerns that have been raised, but also address the points raised by the applicant as well. So we will get to that point, Councillor, but just, Councillor Davis, did you have a point that you wanted to raise? Or did you want to hear from officers first? I think that would be a good way to take it. So, I've got quite a lot down here. I know Mandip's got quite a lot down here, so shall we hand over to yourself, Mandip?
Thank you, Councillor. Thank you for giving us the chance to respond. We had some extremely helpful comments. I will ask the Highways Officer to comment on the access points. If I can touch on some of the, I guess, shall we start with the conditions that were suggested by the resident, which was extremely helpful. I noted down, the first one was a control on the hours of operation. Now, the existing site has no controls. I think the applicants have noted that. We're not aware of any planning controls which restrict the hours of operation for this development, and for that reason it would be extremely difficult to then impose hours of operations. If anything, the enclosure of some of the site with built form which will contain the noise of operations will actually be betterment in terms of noise. I appreciate that residents don't see it that way. However, that is where we are coming from in not restricting the hours of operation, because it's not a position that exists on the site at the moment. So it is able to operate 24 hours. We have some quite noisy businesses in the borough that operate 24 hours, open yard storage, which cause significant detrimental harm, which is why one of the benefits of enclosure by virtue of buildings will, in our opinion, improve the position. So that's the reason I'm offering for not having imposed an hours of operation condition. There was a request to have a banksman to guide vehicles into the site. Now, I will be honest, the proposed layout is offering an internal service yard. There is room to manoeuvre and also loading bays proposed for one of the larger units in the site. So, although there is a concern, there are lots of vehicles parking outside of the site and trying to access. I wonder whether, in my opinion, that would be alleviated by virtue of it having a better layout through the proposed development, and also there are some works being proposed to the access point, which I will pass to Anthony to talk to, which will improve the situation and hopefully prevent any vehicles parking in the local residential areas. We also do have a delivery and servicing plan, so that's condition number 17, which already looks at trying to control site bookings and plan for not having a backup onto the local residential streets. The tree screening points along the residential boundaries. Now, I appreciate that you probably feel that we have overly focused on making sure that the development is screened from the green belt, but we have also secured additional tree planting along the boundaries. I believe that it's the eastern, let's get my bearings, the boundary that we can see along the bottom of this plan that I think is of most concern to residents. Yeah, so I fully appreciate that perhaps we could have tried a bit harder to secure further tree planting, and we will impose, we can amend condition number 4 to secure that. We also do have a condition requiring details of green walls. Now, one of the things I wondered was whether we could try and push for a green wall along that boundary as well as additional tree planting. We had pushed for it along the eastern boundary, and that's because of its relationship with the greenbelt, but it's perfectly justified to try and push for it along the southern boundary of the proposed buildings. So if that's a change that you would wish for, I would support that change to condition number 4. Now, I'm suggesting things. It's for you to table alterations should you wish to. There was a request for a condition which prevents waiting on the residential roads. Now, we can impose conditions to prevent idling of vehicles, but the plans themselves, I feel, prevent the idling of vehicles on the residential roads, because you will allow the vehicles to come into the site, use the internal access road that's been proposed, and all of the servicing yards that are featured within there would hold vehicles rather than having them held on the street. So that is where I have got to on sort of the proposed conditions. I will offer Alan Teddy the opportunity to speak to the highways and access arrangements of the application site, if that's okay to Chairman.
I think, yeah, the access, follow my own rules. I think the access point was well made, and I think we do need to hear from Alan in relation to not only the access to the site, but the impact on the highway adjacent to the site as well. So, Alan, if you could pick up those points.
Thank you very much, Chairman. Thank you.
First point I'd like to make is the size of the development is being reduced. The floor area is being reduced from 3,031 and 3 square metres to 2,116. So accordingly, the amount of trips generated by the development also increases. Over a full working day, there are 168 fewer two-way movements. So with the proposal, there will be fewer trips generated. Now, the access at the moment is something I wouldn't be happy with if it was an application before us. I'll try and explain why. As you leave the site as existing, you would have the garages on your right-hand side and you would have those cars that are parked on your left-hand side. You proceed forwards and then you come to the service road. You proceed a little bit further forwards to the give way line and then you're actually waiting on the right-hand side of the road. You're waiting there and a car driving on the left-hand side of the road, the right side of the road, might turn in and he'll find that vehicle right in front of their path. I'll just try and say that once more. So you're leaving that access road, you'd be up against the garages. As you arrive at the service road, the give way line, you're then on the right-hand side of the road. Now, this development addresses those issues by the entrance at the far end where you can see that brick wall. That would be widened and the vehicles that are parked perpendicular, they would be removed. The access then would be 7.6 metres wide enough for two vehicles to pass. Now, the issue of vehicles arriving on the wrong side of the road would be addressed by taking a developer contribution from the applicant to widen the access where it reaches the service road. So you'd then have a situation where you can quite properly drive on the left-hand side of the road. So a vehicle leaving now would come along where those parked cars are and then arrive at the give way line in the correct position on the left-hand side of the road because the developer will pay for that access to be widened. Hope that's clear. Is that okay, Chairman?
Yeah, I'm sure members might come up with a couple of questions as we go round on that.
And the applicant will also be required, and it's by condition, to erect signs within the development that say give way to incoming vehicles. Another point I'd like to mention is a lot of times the word HGV was mentioned. Now, a HGV could be an oil tanker, it could be a 16.5 metre articulated lorry, it could be a car transporter. I would not wish to see and would not expect to see any vehicles of that type within the development. The largest type of vehicles are known as ordinary goods vehicles 1, which might be a removal van, could be a fire engine, could be a skip lorry, could be a pickup truck. Vehicles of that size maximum.
Okay. If I can come back on that, would you be able to maybe suggest some wording on a condition that would give us some comfort that you know, I mean, I work in the transport industry and, you know, a fire engine can be up to 26 tonnes in weight. So, you know, maybe thinking of a condition that could, you know, allow the site to do business, but also give the residents safeguarding of that type of vehicle. So,
yes, Chairman, I would probably towards the classification of ordinary goods vehicle 1, ordinary goods vehicles 2,
yeah,
with a prohibition of ordinary goods vehicles 2 accessing the site.
Yeah, rigid 2 axles.
Yes.
Yeah, something like that anyway. Okay, right. Before I go to other members' questions, which I've got a couple here, I'd like to address the issue that was made around, it's handy that slide's up here actually, the issue of parking and deeds and the difference of opinion, I think, that lies between what the residents are saying is in their deeds and what the applicant is saying who owns that particular piece of land. So, Glenn, I'm going to look to you to help us out on this one.
Yes, thank you, Chairman. Normally disputes about the use of land are not planning conditions, are not planning matters. And the reason for that is the council simply can't make a decision on what's right and what's wrong. What you have here is residents saying they're entitled to use the land to park in accordance with their deeds. As I understand it, the freeholder, the applicant says, well, the freeholder simply not enforced his right to stop that. So that's really a dispute between the residents and the landowner needs to be sure of their ground in order to make this development operational. So, Chairman, my advice would be for the committee not to dwell on the parking issue there, but rather to concentrate on whether this is an appropriate development in the green belt, and which is the test of the planning permission here. And what you've got there in the report is there's some positive benefits of the proposed development. There are also some detriments to residents there. You've also had some agreement from the applicant for additional conditions in relation to screening and green walls. And again, I see also no objection to the proposed condition about HGV use. So my advice there would be, Chairman, for the committee to consider this application in the round. Is this an appropriate development for the green belt? If not, then the report goes on to assess whether or not the other considerations you should take into account. What are the benefits of this development? What are the negative effects of this development? And are you satisfied that is there any other condition you could impose that would alleviate any detriment to residents that might arise through the development being approved? Thank you.
Okay. Wise words, I think, that committee members need to take into account when deliberating over this. So, okay, we've now heard extensively from officers. We've heard from legal. I'm sure there'll be some other interjections from officers. But Councillor Higgins, do you want to come back now?
Yeah, thank you, Chairman. Now I've heard a lot of it. I'll start off with, I've got a few, so please bear with me, Chairman. Okay. The first is with legal, just mentioning this point here. Are we saying that the freeholder owns the site that is the application, or is the freeholder someone new? No, let me finish, Glenn. Okay, forgive me, but let me finish. Because as far as I'm concerned, the access that our planning transport, Alan, has disclosed to us is on the basis that road is able to be used as an access point to the site. So that's my first question. My second, obviously you've mentioned about I think we should condition the vehicle, if we were to go mindful of approval, the vehicles that can be used, as you stated. So you did my point there. The other thing is these units. I'm very conscious if we were to having we've had other units come through the committee where they have been turned into industrial units, but we make sure that there's sort of adequate noise prevention inside those buildings for typical businesses that are going to come. So at this time we don't know that, but is it possible for us to make sure that is a condition that if a further business that it does make a lot of noise has to implement noise prevention in those units? That's one of them. I know there is an electrical policy that's will come to efficiency. So I want to make sure that all of these units are solar panel powered. And that's about. And the trouble was I wasn't getting the right answers from the applicant about. I expect this to be light industrial usage on that site. I do have a concern about the access, and that's why I'm mentioning about who owns that road to access that site, because we can't really make an honest opinion or an honest judgment if that piece of land doesn't even owned by the applicant, it's someone else, another freeholder. So that's my point, Chairman.
Okay. I'm sure Glenn will come in on that point, but as you know, we've been here before where there's disputes over parcels of land, and that's not for this committee to determine, but I'm sure Glenn will reinforce that.
Yes, thank you, Chairman. I've got no information at all about who owns this land, and that's another reason why I must reiterate the advice earlier that committee should not get involved in that dispute. All I will say is for the applicant, for the planning permission, they need to be sure of their ground if they're looking to stop residents from using the facility they've used for some time, and I think that's all the council could say, Chairman.
Thank you. And the other couple of points you made was around, I suppose, dynamic noise prevention. So dependent on what businesses, and I like the expression light industry. But guys, anything you can add to that, Chris?
Yeah, sorry. I just wanted to, I suppose, make something quite clear. The application itself isn't actually proposing any form of change of use. The application is actually proposing to retain the existing use. So the site actually benefits from the exact use classes which are within the description of development. So this site could be fully operated within those use classes without any noise kind of mitigation whatsoever. And I think that's quite a key point in our consideration within the report. What we're trying, or what the report is trying to convey to members is that by introducing these buildings within this location, we are in fact reducing the noise which residents may consider to be inappropriate within that area, but what the fallback would be much worse, and that would be for an open storage facility which there would be no noise mitigation whatsoever.
Thank you. Mandy, did you want to come back on that?
And just to add to that, so condition number 8 does require that for the lifetime of the development, the level of noise is restricted, and so that's been an imposition requested by a condition which is required to be imposed by our noise officer. So it has been considered that there is a certain level of noise that the existing site generates, that's what the noise assessment was based on, and that the future for the lifetime of the development should not exceed levels that are satisfactory to residential amenity. Was there anything else?
Solar panels.
So, solar panels. Before we go on to solar panels, the ownership certificate on the planning application has served notice on solely to leaseholders within the red line. So there must be an assumption that they own the land within there. They have not declared that or served notice on other parties. So that would indicate to us from a planning perspective that we're making a decision based on what's been submitted by the applicant. I hope that's helpful. Thank you.
Okay. Councillor Davis, did you want to come back now you've heard a bit more from officers?
Yes, thank you, Chairman. I have a couple of things. One of my concerns would be about waste removal. Is there any chance we could restrict that because it's in a residential area, that maybe no early hour collections? Yeah. And the second question I have, where is it? I've got it written down here. We've done a traffic survey. I would be concerned, look, if we take out that road, that we could have a 7.5 ton vehicle waiting at the junction, at the exit of the site, and has no sight line of what's coming down the road. So if you say that site there, if we're at the gate, there's no visible sight line to see what's coming down Harlington Road in both directions. Is there a way we could have something added to the junction of Harlington Road that possibly we could see oncoming vehicles? So if you have a look round, it's quite a built-up area. So if you can see on that plan there, you've got a high-storey block of flats, and if a HGV or a 7.5 ton vehicle was to leave that site, it has no visible clearance.
Alan, is that something you can pick up?
Thank you, Chairman. Yes, I consider that the development would improve the current situation by widening the access at the junction with the high street. Thereby vehicles would sit on the right hand side of the road, the left hand side of the road, and then they would have the same visibility to the left, to the right as vehicles using the junction as existing. I should probably mention though that to widen the access it would result in the loss of one car parking space, and I've discussed that with colleagues who supervise the parking management schemes, and in their opinion that was satisfactory. Thank you, Chairman.
Okay, so I think that comes back to the point you said about in the heads of terms, a 278 arrangement to make adjustments to the road network to give us that extra access point.
That's correct, that's been negotiated and secured. Thank you, Chairman.
I have one more question.
Councillor, do you want to follow up on that or come back with another question?
I have another question. Is there a way we can restrict the use of these premises? Because I would be concerned that if it's going to be some sort of wholesale business, we could have a lot of non-commercial vehicles attending the site for people picking up things, say it was a hardware business or a cash and carry or something like that. I would be concerned that there would be a lot of vehicles attending that site. or whether we can use some sort of access restrictions within the weekends or something to try and help the residents.
I'm going to let Mandit come in a second, but I think in the absence of knowing what businesses are going in there, we're kind of fishing in the dark a little bit. But I think I'll come back to Chris's point, is that this isn't a change of use application, so we're not looking to sort of change what already goes on in there, you know. But I don't know if there's anything you want to add to that, Mandit.
Not particularly, simply that obviously the request to restrict the size of vehicles will ultimately restrict the extent of harm to amenity that could come from the larger vehicles. So hopefully that's satisfactory. In terms of restriction on the waste operation hours, I think condition 17 could be added to restrict the collection of waste from the units to, say, 8 to 6, which I think are social hours.
Yeah.
Okay. Thank you.
Okay. Councillor Bennett.
Thank you, Chairman. So I just wanted to pick up on Mandit's point around, I think it was condition 4. I think we'd probably welcome an expansion of that to include some increased screening to the south of the site. I think that would in part address some of the petition's concerns. And I also had a question for Alan. Just there was a lot spoken around the traffic on Harlington High Street, the types of vehicles. Are there any restrictions currently on the length or weight of vehicle that use that road?
Alan, you okay with that?
Thank you, Chairman. Harlington High Street forms part of the Council's classified route network, and there are no limits on the type of vehicle that can use it. Thank you, Chairman.
Okay. Okay, thank you. Councillor Gill.
Thank you, Chair. Just a couple of questions for me in terms of safety for pedestrians as well. As the trucks pull out, or whatever vehicle, it might be coming at a speed or might intersect the pedestrian trying to cross the path of the entrance. Is there anything in place to prevent any problems for pedestrians there?
Another one for you, Alan. You're earning your, despite I forgot you at the beginning, you're certainly earning your corn tonight. So over to you.
Yeah, thank you, Chairman. With the developer, we've managed to negotiate an active travel zone contribution of £87,000. Active travel zone contribution, that can be used to improve the safety and convenience of walking and cycling, and also the use of public transport. I think you've made a good suggestion, and perhaps we could consider using some of that active travel zone contribution to providing a speed table at the junction to the development. Just an idea. But my point is, there will be funds available to improve pedestrian and cycle safety. And that could be used, as I just thought, as an idea.
Okay.
Thank you, Chairman.
Just a second question.
Yeah, go for it.
Independent of that. There was the issue raised by the petitioner regarding vehicles shouldn't be waiting to enter. I mean, that could cause a problem on that narrow road. Is there some sort of restrictions we can impose that would prevent that, rather than leaving that just to the goodwill of the drivers?
Yes, thank you, Chairman. The access would be widened and vehicles would be able to pass one another, so a vehicle leaving wouldn't obstruct a vehicle arriving, and don't envisage a problem arising. Thank you, Chairman.
Okay. Did you want to come back on anything on that?
I think I was going to suggest that we add a condition to secure a speed table if we feel that it would be a betterment for pedestrians as well as for the site, and then access in and out, if that's agreed.
Yeah, or it's either a conditional or included in the head, isn't it? In the terms.
I think we'd secure a condition to get the details, and then probably use the active travel zone monies that we've secured to implement the works. Because it's not part of the proposals, I prefer it was designed in and signed off. Okay, fantastic.
Okay, thank you. Anything else? Councillor Davis again.
Chairman, in light of what we've heard, I would consider moving for approval with this, because we can restrict and help the residents better. So I would move for approval.
Okay, thank you. There's a few points I just want to pick up before we go on, but Councillor Higgins, do you want to follow up?
Yeah, I will second that. I mean, I understand what residents are feeling, but if we can control it now, it'd be better. And to be honest, also, there is a loss of this type of, usually these areas are made into housing or something else, and to have opportunities for local people to work locally, I think is admirable at this present moment in time. So, yeah, I will second it on the understanding of those additional conditions that we had discussed just a few moments ago.
Okay, thank you. Right, any other questions from anybody? There's a couple of things I want to pick up, recognising we are moved and seconded, but the petition has picked up about idling. Now, I know we've touched on idling engines outside, but obviously when they're in the compound to a degree, I'm thinking, if they're waiting for X business to open or they're unloading or whatever it is, the last thing the residents want is idling engines or radios blaring at 4 o'clock in the morning or whatever it is, or late at night. So is there anything we could do on possibly, adding to whatever condition here that, there'll be measures in place to restrict idling? It's great for air quality as well. So I don't know if anybody... And the other point that was picked up by the residents was the hours of operation, and I think what is tying the hands of this committee is the fact that there's no restrictions at the moment. But is there anything that we could possibly do to? What I don't want to do is tie the hands of the businesses that are going to be in there so they're not able to operate. But we also want to achieve that balance that residents' amenity is also protected. So any suggestions?
In my opinion, if we were to impose a condition, the committee is within their right to do so, and if it were to be appealed against, so an appeal can be lodged against the imposition of a condition, I do not feel we would be successful. But it is within your remit to impose a condition. However, we don't stand a great chance through the appeal process.
Yeah. And I've got Councillor Dott coming in, and I think it's worthy to note that if nothing was to happen to this site, if we were just to leave it as it is, then it is unrestricted. They can do what they like, when they like, with what they like. And I think, as Councillor Higgins has alluded to, the imposition of these conditions, which a lot of have been suggested by the lead petitioner, lead us to gain an element of control over this site, which we wouldn't have. And this committee's been in this position before with other developments, and we know one that's just a bit further down the road from here. So that's what I just wanted to say on that point. We are going to apply a level of control to this site that we currently haven't got. So Councillor Dott.
Yeah, coming back to your point, Chairman, in the absence of knowledge, what kind of business coming over there, and especially this area is very close to Heathrow Airport, and for example, airline catering company start business there, that's a 24 hours business, so we can't restrict the hours of operations over there, isn't it? So while we don't have any knowledge what kind of business is coming there, it's difficult to decide.
Okay. Chris, did you want to come in?
Yeah, just on that point, by restricting the type of vehicles that are allowed to enter and exit the site, you effectively restrict the type of business that could be operated. And also, I think the whole idea of a flexible use class is that you don't end up with what would be empty units if there isn't a demand for a very specific occupier within that area. So I think the flexible use class, while this isn't a change of use application, the existing use classes are flexible. I think it is quite important that they remain flexible in order to ensure that they are occupied and we don't end up with empty units. Thank you.
And I think that's an excellent point, really well made. We're making the assumption on manufacturing type units moving in, but you could end up, and I think someone said earlier on, software companies could be in there, and not going to hopefully make too much noise. But we're going to go through. We are moved and seconded, but I think we need to, before we vote, we just need to clarify what we're voting on. So the first thing is an additional condition restricting size of vehicle. And I think I'll delegate that to officers for the appropriate wording, but it was something along the lines of rigid vehicles only. Condition 4, we said, a couple of members have said we wanted to strengthen that, and again we'll delegate that to officers. Now I didn't know whether we was having an additional green wall condition on the southern boundary, or whether we were just going to add it to the existing condition 4. That's fine. A no idling condition, particularly within the confines of the sites. We talked extensively around access arrangements, which is condition 24, I believe. Yep. And that's when Alan took us through how 278 monies are going to be used to widen the access point, and also further took us on to how the active travel zone contribution will also help pedestrian safety. And that leads us on to a waste collection restriction, which condition 17, thank you Mandip. So yeah, condition 17, we're going to add on some restrictions as to when waste can be collected. And the final point I've got here was a speed table added to the junction to again slow vehicles down and again add to pedestrian safety. On that. So that's, I don't think I've missed anything, have I? No? Okay. So, Councillor Higgins?
Yeah, the solar panels.
Yeah, just on the solar panels, there is a condition which requires a revised energy strategy, and there's a standard head of term in there, so we will be seeking a revised energy strategy. Just trying to find which condition it is, which seeks to achieve 14, yeah, 20, sorry. Yeah, it basically seeks an assessment to ensure that additional on-site mitigation is provided, and where that can't be provided, then there'll be an off-site contribution, but that will certainly encompass PV panels.
The current proposals are for a combination of air source heat pumps and PV panels, so we'll be seeking to maximise the roof, which is
I think there is some shown.
Yeah, there is some shown. Yep. Sorry, through you, Chairman. Also, charging points for vehicles on site, please. Yeah, it is in there, but that'll be in that strategy as well.
Okay, right, so I've just been through my list of revised conditions and additional conditions. With my members, we are moved and seconded. I'm not seeing anybody else indicate to speak, so can I have a show of hands for officers' recommendation to approve this? With the conditions, so that's those against? So is that an abstention, Councillor Gaelic?
No, I did see that.
Do you, no, well, I must have missed that. So that's unanimous, seven votes. Item 7 this evening is approved with a substantial amount of additional and revised conditions. Thank you very much, everybody, for a very healthy debate. Okay, right. What we'll do is, if people are hanging around, we'll let them, if they're going to go or not. Okay, right, we'll move on to agenda item 8, which is the Paddington packet boat. This is a non-petition item, and I'll hand over to Andrew, who's going to take us through this, Andrew, and welcome to the committee.
Thanks, Chair. So today's proposal relates to the Paddington packet boat, a vacant pub on the corner of Packet Boat Lane and the High Road in Cowley. It's proposed to be demolished and replaced with a block of purpose-built student accommodation.
Can I just ask if you're staying? We just remind you we've got another application being heard. If you're leaving, we'll let you leave nice and quietly so we can hear the next application. Okay, I think we're right now, Andrew. Thank you. Sorry for interrupting you.
That's right, no worries. Right, so as can be seen here on the constraints plan, whilst not covered by a planning designation, to the south is the Packet Boat Lane locally significant industrial site. Approximately 150 metres to the west, just on the left-hand side of the screen, you can see the edge of the Cowley Lock Conservation Area. And to the north of the site, you've got two Grade 2 listed buildings, the Old Cottage on the left-hand side and Barnacre on the right. I'm going to skip ahead here to the photos, which are later down the slide, so a couple of spoilers here. Nope, even more. Right, there we go. So this is the bird's eye view of the site. I'm going to start sort of on the north-hand side. So there are bungalows on the northern side of the high road, to the sort of right, to the east of the site. Then sort of wrapping around in a clockwise fashion, we've got Linden Terrace, which are two-storey houses to the south. You've got these sort of 2 to 3 storey industrial sheds within the industrial site to the south. To the left, it's shown a white roof there, is Packet Boat House, which is a 5-storey block of flats that was recently built. To the left of that, up along the access road, you've got Union Park, which is sort of a 5-storey block of flats, or collection of blocks of flats. And then the northern side of Packet Boat Lane, we have some sort of 2-storey residential houses. This is the front of the building as existing. It's fairly distinctive appearance despite its modest size, and it's located on a very prominent bend of the high road. We consider this building to be a non-designated heritage asset, following an unsuccessful attempt to see the building nationally listed in 2019, although clearly the current building is in a very poor state of repair externally, and it's understood that internally it's also been gutted as well. The current building, as you can see here, is boarded up. It's been boarded up since at least last year when that photo was taken, but it's been vacant since 2018. As you can see here, it's got some fairly distinctive gables, and some barge boards which sort of decorated the top have since been removed, which is unfortunate. Again, this shows more damage to the roof, and kind of boarding up. To the rear of the site, you've got what was a pub garden or beer garden and parking, which is also boarded up as well. And here we are sort of flicking around the site from the south, so again you can see some more damage to the roof on that side as well. This is taken slightly further away on a slightly wetter day as well, and you can sort of see the context of the pub with the houses in the background. To a similar photo, but to the right you can see sort of the tops of the bungalows sticking through. And then a similar position, you can see Linden Terrace on the left behind those trees, and sort of the new build block of flats, Packet Boat House to the back of the pub there. Again, similar view, but you can just sort of see that the state of the pub is slowly deteriorating. This is just sort of looking straight down Packet Boat Lane, so you can see sort of the lower scale industrial buildings right in the background of that, and to the right of the picture you've got the 2-storey houses opposite the pub. Yeah, again, just sort of another picture of the pub. Here's it in a bit more context, sort of looking from across the road. Yeah, again, Packet Boat House to the right. I've taken sort of slightly further back, just sort of slowly walking up the road as I take photos. Again, you can see the Packet Boat House, the new build block of flats there behind the houses. So again, this is taken a fair bit north, and you can see on the left. See, you've got the 2 listed buildings in this view. The listed building behind sort of those row of trees on the left, that's Barnacre. It's very well screened, so you don't get any views of it really from outside. To the right, and I'm going to take this next photo a bit closer, we've got the old cottage, which is an old Wealdon-style cottage, relatively old. Been there ages, in fact, from when the dates from when it was a village originally, and it's had development slowly built up around it. This is on Packet Boat Lane itself. They've got the pub in the foreground, the houses on the left, and the new build block of flats on the right. And then sort of similar position to the right. If you went down that road, you'd head into the locally significant industrial site. So now I'm going to skip back to the plans, and we'll go through all that again. So I get my bearings. So now that we've got plans up, as you can see here, the current building is like right at the front of the site, basically abuts the boundary, and you can see that in the photos before. I'm going to sort of skip through these existing elevations, giving you just sort of the photos. Here's a site plan. The proposal will build in an L shape, sort of wrapping around the frontage of the site, addressing High Road to the right and addressing Packet Boat Lane to the left. The proposal will have 61 student rooms in it, all single occupancy. Communal amenity area to the rear, replicating sort of where the beer garden is. The bin store would be on the left, along with one wheelchair accessible space, and there's cycle stores also on the left boundary, near the southern end of the site and near the amenity area. It's also worth noting that there's 3 motorcycle spaces by the entrance. We can just sort of skip that one, it's basically the same thing. Here's the ground floor plan. So you can see the main entrance is on the corner of the site, there in the middle. The residential lounge, laundry room, reception, all at ground floor level. That was an amendment to the scheme we made because we weren't that keen on the student rooms abutting straight onto the highway, basically. So we can see, did that skip one? No. Okay. Yeah, as you can see, you can just about make out the dotted red line. I think you can probably make it out clear on this one. That's where the existing pub is. So you can see that the proposed building is set significantly further back from the front than the existing pub, which offers that opportunity for landscaping and a bit better public realm to the front. These are all the floor units. They're pretty similar. Unit sizes range from sort of 15.8 to 19.8 square metres, which is pretty standard for student accommodation. There are no actual set standards, but we compared it to what they've offered at Brunel Uni on campus, and it's pretty similar. Accessible rooms, which make up 10% of the total, range from 23.3 to 30 square metres, obviously larger needs for circulation, wheelchair accessible bathroom, etc. In the middle of the site, in the middle of the building, we've just got the single core, but it's lift access as well as a stair, and that lift is wheelchair compliant. So these are some elevators. These are in sort of the courtyard elevations, so I'll skip through them because they're not that helpful. These are the sort of side elevations. This is the front. So this is looking from Packet Boat Lane. You can see that in context it's lower than the adjacent building. Also steps down or steps up, left to right, however you view it. And the top floor is set back to reduce its perception of scale. Looking at the high road, it's a lower scale to reflect the sort of the lower level of buildings on the high road. It steps up to scale from Linden Terrace, which is 2 stories, up to 3, and then up to 4, and then sort of wrapping up to 5. It's also got some fairly nice details, quite nice banding. I think there'll be soldier courses in reality, but I think they're shown as sort of brown banding there. Skipping through the sections, here's the CGI. You'll have a good idea of what it will look like. The report covers this in detail, but I'll just go through it whilst we're at the end of the presentation. Student accommodation is needed across London and within the borough. This is the first purpose-built student accommodation scheme we've had off campus in, first we've had we know of. PBSA, or purpose-built student accommodation, is an appropriate land use in this site, providing an important component of the borough's overall supply of new housing. It's especially relevant to this surrounding area because there's an Article 4 in place which prevents or controls PD rights turning homes into HMOs, which is the most common type of student accommodation off campus, which obviously if you get too much of it in one place causes a bit of an issue. So we kind of need to, if we're taking that approach, we need to provide somewhere else where they can go, which is directly for them. So this works in tandem with the Article 4, sort of moving them out of that area and moving them to an area that's especially designed. In terms of, this is another view, but so the existing pub is a non-designated heritage asset, which, when operational, also had some community value, although the fact that it sort of wasn't very viable sort of lends the idea that it wasn't a huge community asset. It's not lost as nonetheless regrettable, but marketing evidence does demonstrate there's no realistic prospect of it being used as a pub in the future or as a different community use. With little, if anything, any meaningful interest when it was marketed. It's been marketed for a period of well over 2 years now. It should be noted that initially it was offered at a price that we felt was too high given the poor state of the building and the internal gutting, but that was lowered down to an offer that we felt was more acceptable. It's been on that offered at that price since October 2020, which is 2 years, and therefore it meets that element of the policy. It doesn't meet all aspects of the policy because the policy requires it to be offered at a way it could be let out immediately and the pub's sort of gutted, but they bought it at that opportunity at that point, so there's no real opportunity to meet that policy requirement. This design is considered to be contextual. I mean, obviously it's a slightly bigger scale than the more traditional housing, but because you've got the precedent of Packet Boat House and then beyond that Union Park, and it steps up in scale legibly, I think we're relatively happy with the design. The major benefit, though, I should say, is the affordable housing that we've secured. Initially, it came in at 0% affordable housing. We've now secured 36%, which means that it's policy compliant and benefits from the fast-track route. Affordable housing is, in general, positive, but specifically for students, what this means is that it fixes rent levels at 55% of the total level of the maintenance loan that any student can get on that year. What that means in practice is that your maintenance loan, you can guarantee that if you've got accommodation, your maintenance loan won't be required to cover all of your living, all of just your rent, and you can, spend it on other types of maintenance and living. This is especially important for students who often, they can come from mixed backgrounds, and this acts, the cost of living at university can act as a social barrier to people from all backgrounds attending university, and this addresses that need satisfactorily by providing a policy compliant level on opening up or crossing out barriers to allow more people to attend higher education at a reasonable rate. These are what it shows affordable housing on all floors, which is benefit. It's not just crammed into one corner, and it's a mix of sort of unit types and sizes. On that basis, the proposal is recommended for approval, subject to the conditions in the report and the addendum.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you very much for that, Andrew. Right, it's not a petition item. I'm not seeing any councillors from USI here. Have we got any written representations from USI councillors? No. Okay. Right, so we can go straight to questions. Councillor Higgins, Councillor Davis, Councillor Dotts.
Thank you, Chair. The only thing is, I like this actually. I think it's really good. But it's only two things. And I know this might sound really horrible because I was a horrible student. Is drinking in that amenity area with other housing around? Is there any way we can restrict that there isn't parties and stuff in that amenity area? I don't understand about only why there's two motorbikes things. Three, sorry, beg your pardon. Wouldn't it be better for us to, as Brunel has those bikes, those Santander bikes, Boris bikes I call them, why shouldn't we just have those there? Obviously we don't want, we're going to have loads of scooters. I'm just a bit concerned about that. Apart from that, I like it, and I will go with the officer's recommendation and approve it.
Okay, thank you. Right, a couple of points there. Any restrictions that can be applied on that amenity area which abuts Linden Terrace? Any thoughts?
I would just say that there is an access road between the Linden Terrace Gardens, so the area that we can see immediately abutting the red line to the south of number 4 is a vehicular access point. So harm by virtue of noise is likely to be fairly limited. Andrew would like to, yeah.
Come in, Andrew.
I appreciate the sentiment, and possibly you were a terrible student, but the condition you're suggesting is akin to controlling someone's rear garden and what they can use it for, so I don't think it'll be reasonable.
Through you, Councillor Higgins.
Through you, Chairman. Obviously we can say that no loud music or flashing lights or discos and stuff can be put on. It's just, look, they're probably going to be all absolutely perfect students, and they're all going to be absolutely wonderful. Reality is slightly different, and in the summer, you know, nice hot summer, out in the garden, everybody's out there, you know, drinks and noise, and how long it will stay. You know, it could go on a little bit longer than necessary. And we do have Linden Terrace, which are loads of residents, and obviously the new flats on the other side of that as well. And noise does carry. I know there's traffic and everything else. That would be mine. But if we can't, we can't. You know. But I just think we should be mindful of that.
We might have a suggestion for you.
So for, I think you might recall for Keith House, we have a management plan in place. So I'm happy to impose the requirements for a management plan. Probably not so happy to say that they can't use the space, but we will look at how it could be managed to be kind to residential amenity.
And the other point around Santander bikes, which I know is normally ahead of term, isn't it?
Again, I can know this. So they've got a policy-compliant level of cycle parking on site. I mean, and I know that's not the same as the Santander cycle hire scheme. I mean, the scheme's viability, whilst we didn't look at it in great detail because it's a policy-compliant level of affordable housing, and therefore we're not required to go into that sort of level of assessment, I'm aware that it is relatively constrained, and more off-site contributions may push them into the red. However, I mean, if it's an obligation that you feel we could support, you can add it on.
Did you want to come back, Councillor?
Yeah, I mean, scooters are quite affordable, and who's going to get those 3 spaces? You know, there's a lot of flats there, so that's my concern. If you put something in like that, and you've only got 3 spaces, and we've got how many? Oh, God, I can't remember now. 60. There's going to be some sort of conflict there, and you're going to have bikes on top of bikes and things. So, in some ways, for me, it'd be better to just take it away, so it's not there, or provide more spaces for motorcycles. And Uber Eats, I suppose. Come out of there.
Andrew's going to come back on that
point.
Sorry,
there is a car park management plan as one of the conditions which will control how those spaces get allocated and to who and over what sort of period. So, you know, because they're only yearly leases as students generally, it would sort of mix and match over a long period.
Is there a preference for perhaps the car parking management plan to review what's needed and then be amended to reflect what is, if we have no motorcycles and we need more bike spaces, we can amend accordingly. We also know that Santander isn't that far, Brunel University isn't that far from the site, so I wouldn't want to see a docking station here. I fear that it wouldn't possibly be used, and there would be one at West Drayton Station, which isn't that far.
Through you again, Chairman, forgive me. It's just the fact of only 3, and I just think that that's just a recipe for disaster, really. It's just, you know, I can see that. You know, when I was at college, 6 or 7 of us had scooters, you know, Vespers and stuff like that. But just 3 for that many units. Is just
I think the compromise of reviewing the car park management plan.
Yeah, exactly. I think it's better that way.
Is absolutely fine. Okay, I've got Councillor Davis, Councillor Dott, and Councillor. Is that indicating? No. So Councillor Davis, Councillor Dott.
It's. I just want to say on record, it's a shame to see another pub disappear, and also something with a little bit of local history for some of us councillors. Can I ask, can we condition for it to be just student accommodation? Is there a way we can put something in place? Because I would be concerned that down the line this might develop into something else.
Do you want to come in on that one?
So the application is for purpose-built student accommodation. It cannot change to another use, self-contained residential, or even purpose-built shared living, which is a different type of residential accommodation, without the benefit of coming before planning committee again.
Okay.
Okay.
I have one more.
You want to come back with another supplementary?
No, don't. I just have a separate question.
A separate question then?
Yeah.
Go for it.
It's to Alan. Have we done a parking review of the area? Because I understand it's a car-free site, but I would be concerned that students travelling down from up north, etc., may be bringing their own vehicles, and would there be increased parking stress in the area?
Over to you, Alan.
Thank you very much, Chairman. Yes, the developments will not provide any on-street, on-plot car parking except for one disabled space. Should there be a demand for more than one disabled space, we're taking a developer's contribution to fund the provision of disabled parking on street. That would be the lining and the signing and the traffic order making. In answer to Councillor Davis's question, the developer will be required to submit to the council for approval a pick-up and drop-off strategy, because we're mindful that lots of cars will all be arriving on the Saturday and Sunday before term and then picking their students up at the end of the term. So the strategy we expect to see will contain details of how occupiers of a room, names and addresses, that you will have a slot to be picked up, say 2:30 on Saturday, and the next person 3:30 on the Saturday. So the pick-up and drop-off of students will be managed and controlled, so we don't get instances where you've got cars waiting on the highway, all building up and impeding the free flow of traffic. We're also taking a contribution for the introduction of a parking management scheme. Should local residents feel that students are in fact owning cars and it's creating parking stress, we'll be taking a contribution and we'll have the money then to introduce a parking management scheme in response to residents' own requests.
Okay.
Thank you, Chairman.
No problem. Well spoken. Councillor Davis, does that answer your point?
Thank you.
Yeah, no, that's very good. Mandy, you just want to come in quickly before we go to Councillor Dott?
Thank you. I just wanted to flag one thing. So Andrew has mentioned the 2019 request to statutory list the building, which was unsuccessful. Members will probably have seen that this site was on the request for a local list. Now, because of the deterioration of the building and the way in which the proposal for the local list had been tabled, it was removed from consideration. So I did want to, it would be remiss of us not to mention that it was on a proposal to be locally listed, but it's currently being re-evaluated because of the deterioration of the building and the way in which it was formally put to Cabinet for local listing. Thank you.
Okay, yeah, good point that members need to be aware of, and indeed anybody watching as well. Councillor Dott.
Thank you, Chairman. Even Councillor Davis hijacked my question, but I wanted to ask, students, they need to sign the agreement. They will not bring any cars into the building, but how about their parents or friends or family if they're coming to visit them? But you already answered the question, so thank you.
Okay, thank you very much. Right. We're moved. Oh, Councillor, sorry, I've got you written down here, but I was busily reading. So, Councillor Gill.
Just one final question. With student accommodation and the contracts they give for usage, from what I remember, it was September till end of June. So normally July and August they let it out again to other people. So that's where I might be a bit concerned that might be let out to members of the public or tourists or something. So that might breach that idea of student accommodation.
So during the summer holidays, what you're referring to, yeah. So can we pick up that point?
Yeah, so the London Plan actually recommends they do that because it improves their viability. They've not proposed it as part of this, and I have known student providers to offer 12-month contracts despite the fact that you're not going to be there for 12 months, you're only going to be there for 9.
Okay. Cool. Councillor Davis.
I've one final question. It says in the report, I believe, that they have to have a contract with Brunel. For how many years is that going to be? Is there going to be a length of term on that?
Okay. Yeah, so it's not necessarily Brunel. I mean, we have spoken to Brunel and they are interested in entering into a nominations agreement, but it's any higher education provider. So it could be Bucks as well.
I'm right to come back. Have we set a length of term on that?
Oh, sorry, it's in perpetuity, I think.
Right. Okay. And on that, I'd be happy to second Councillor Higgins.
Okay. No, thank you. Any other questions? Right. We're moved and we're seconded on this application. Can I have a show of hands in favour of officer's recommendation? So that's 7 out of 7, unanimous. I can confirm agenda item 8 this evening is approved. Thank you. Right. It brings us to the final item this evening, which is agenda item 9. 14 to 18 Pield Heath Road. That's you again, Andrew. Yep. Over to you.
Thanks, Chair. So this proposal is to demolish 3 houses and 1 bed and breakfast and build a 60-bed care home within the C2 youth class. You can see from this location plan, it's in a mostly residential area. Don't know if you know Pield Heath Road, but it goes all the way to Hillingdon Hospital to the west, and there's an area of greenbelt opposite. As you can see here, there's no site designations covering the site, but there's an area of greenbelt opposite. And as you can see from the location plan, although it's pretty hatched, so not that helpful, but there's 4 properties within there, 3 houses and 1 bed and breakfast. 2 Pield Heath Avenue is the bungalow at the top, and then you've got a pair of similar detached houses facing Pield Heath Road, and then you've got a bed and breakfast on the corner, which doesn't really address any of the roads properly. I'm going to do the same thing I did last time and take you to the photos, and we can do that first and then get back. So here we go, bird's eye view. As you can see, there's typically bungalows to the north along Pield Heath Avenue. You've got the greenbelt opposite, and you've got sort of a slightly higher, but mostly 2 to 3 story buildings on Pield Heath Road. I'm just going to take you through the photo. So this is on Pield Heath Road, looking west. You've got some 2-story houses, typical of Pield Heath Road on the right. You can just about see the pair of semi-detached buildings that we demolished, poking through there. Sort of a similar view. I'm just walking up the road, really. Existing buildings are hidden behind these trees and hedges. This is on Pield Heath Road, looking directly at the bed and breakfast, which you can see there. It's got a large parking forecourt to the front. I've taken a step backwards here, it's slightly confusing, but that's to the right of the bed and breakfast. It's a pair of semi-detached houses. And I've walked up again. So this is the corner, looking back at the way we came on Pield Heath Road. That's just part of the main bit of the site. You've got the single-story bed and breakfast and the houses behind. And that's looking up Pield Heath Avenue, which, as I mentioned before, is a much smaller scale, mostly single-story, although they've all been converted in the roof space. This, again, is the parking area to the front, houses behind. That's going to go. Looking at Pield Heath Avenue again, Now looking down Pield Heath Avenue, so on the left you've got the application site. That's 2 Pield Heath Avenue, which would be demolished. And that's just the general street view. You can see the lower scale, is what I'm talking about there. So I'm going to go back to the plans, and we can do that. Right. So this is the existing plan. It shows quite a lot of buildings in there. There's actually more buildings than just the houses, because there's quite a lot of outbuildings in the site at present, and you've got a swimming pool in there as well. So it's quite a cluttered site at present, albeit relatively low scale. These are the existing plans. So that's the B&B. These are some of the outbuildings. There's quite a few, as I mentioned, and those are just some sort of sections of the site. And that's also another building. So this is the pro-site plan. It's a C-shaped layout, so it addresses kind of both frontages, Pield Heath Road and Pield Heath Avenue. Its main elevation faces Pield Heath Avenue because it's got the main entrance facing that, but it does address both roads, and it wraps around the front, sort of stepping up in scale, sort of lower story at the left, as I'll show you in a sec. Here are the floor plans. The basement level, you've got all of sort of the back of house facilities. You've got so you've got a cinema room, you've got a family room, general amenities, but alongside laundry, ancillary office, mechanical plant, that sort of thing. As you sort of go upstairs, you get the sort of the communal areas in the building are mostly located in the middle to reduce walking distances when you're in the building, given that it'll be a care home, which is a logical layout. Right here we can see the elevations. I'm going to skip these elevations and then go to... Nope. That's the one. So these are the two main elevations you'll see if you're on the public realm. Elevation A faces Pield Heath Avenue, so faces west, and elevation B faces Pield Heath Road, so faces south. As you can see, it steps up in scale from sort of starting at 2 stories on the left and rising to 3 on the right, which sort of to make efficient use of the plot. It's also got quite a traditional design. Despite its scale, it's got the sort of the residential gables at the front and a hipped roof, so it just has a relatively residential appearance. As we go through, right, here we can see the UGF plan, which UGF is urban greening factor. It achieves a score of 0.4, which is indicative of not covering too much of the site, basically in built form, when they've got sufficient greening or landscaping around the edges. Overall, the scheme is considered to be a public benefit. Care homes are needed across London and again in the borough. It's not broken down by housing targets by borough instead of in the same way housing targets are. But care home provision is monitored by the GLA, and it's monitored on a one-to-one basis, which is the equivalent of every bedroom freeing up a house somewhere else in the borough. So whilst it's quite a constrained plot and the bedrooms are small, it's the equivalent of freeing up 60 homes elsewhere in the borough, which is obviously quite helpful. It also adds to the housing choice. But you need loads of different housing types at various stages of your life. This is towards the end of your life, but it's for when care is provided and it's needed on site, which is obviously important. The loss of residential is rarely supported, but because it's an intensification of use and there's a clear overriding need to provide C2 homes, we consider the scheme to be acceptable. On this basis, it's recommended for approval, subject to the conditions, obligations in the report and the addendum. Thank you, Chair.
Okay, thank you very much for taking us through, Andrew. Right, we've got no other speakers on this one, but I've got Councillor Higgins, Councillor Bennett, Councillor Davis and Councillor Dott indicating they'd like to speak. So, Councillor Higgins.
Andrew, is it possible for you to put us the elevations against relationship to the houses that are next to it? The grey building on our left, is that a house or is that garages?
So the smaller one is the 2-story element is the house, and I don't know what that single-story element is actually. But I can go look at the street view.
I have difficulty with this. The road is full of bungalows, and this is big, and especially in relationship with that house there, and the height is higher than the house that's on the other side as well. I'm a bit concerned about this. In my view, it is too big. The gables and the things, and there's not that elevation to drop it right down with that bungalow on the thing. That's still quite over dominant on that building there. I don't know if there's any other way, and I don't know around the corner as well. What's that relationship there is a bit worrying as well. The size of it compared with, I mean, obviously you must have done a shadow diagram, which would be fine, I suppose, but I don't. It doesn't fit right. Sorry. That's my opinion. I'll let others speak.
Okay. So, Councillor Higgins raised a concern around bulk and mass in relationship to the neighbouring properties, I guess, is the best way to describe that. So, you want to pick that up?
I appreciate Councillor Higgins's concerns. Now, the area isn't just bungalows, so we can go back to the photographs to set out that there are two-storey properties, semi-detached properties. Lots of the roofs have additional accommodation in them, and whilst an image like this is probably not overly helpful, the building roof heights have been brought down. They didn't start like this through the pre-app, they were significantly greater, but the key focus of the application through its negotiation has been to make it relate to its neighbours, hence the drop down of the site to the rear along the single storey property you can see on elevation A, and ensuring the roof was always ridged and the uppermost floor of accommodation was within that roofscape. But I know it's a subjective matter.
Mayor, Chairman, it's just, again, at the bottom diagram, you're enclosing that smaller bungalow between a large. I appreciate the road. It does go up and down, but majority of the houses down there are bungalows. And that element there again is, for me, it's not the bit in the middle is not really that much of my problem. It's the bits on the end that are the problem, where they should step down even further to make sure that they are then, there is that element of airiness between the buildings. That's my problem with it. Anyway, it's up to others to think about it as well.
I'm sure other members will be able to comment, but before we go to other members, is there anything to add to Councillor Higgins' point?
One, if I can, perhaps this might help, but page 253 of your plan pack does show the outline of the existing building in red. It's not in the presentation because we slimmed it down. Apologies, but page 253, I can pass you my hard copy. Okay. Does show the outline. Oh, it is there. Sorry. I don't know if you can see. So the Pield Heath Avenue street scene, the fourth street scene down, does have the red dotted outline of the existing against what is proposed. So yeah, it might be easier from Councillor Bennett's pack. But due regard has been had to the existing built form.
Sorry, can I just pick up that point? I don't think that's a house. Just what what I was referring to in the previous drawing. So if it, how do you use a pointer? So, yeah, sorry, I'm just going to look it up on Street View now, but I'm pretty sure that Pield Heath Road is characterised by two-storey houses and not bungalows, so I assume that's just a garage.
Is there a picture in the presentation?
I'm just going to check on Street View, but I can let's pick through this.
The difficulty with Street View is, I'm sure Glenn will have a view, is that...
Sorry, through you, Chairman, it's the avenue that's the bungalows.
Yeah.
Sorry, okay, so to clarify, just to be clear, so elevation B is facing Pield Heath Road, and sort of that single-storey structure, I don't think that's a house. I think that's like a garage or something. And on elevation A on the left, that is top even, that is Pield Heath Avenue, and that is a bungalow on the left.
Yeah, but then the two-storey building further along. Sorry to you, Chairman. The two-storey, thank you. The two-storey building past that bungalow is lower than that gable, isn't it?
So yeah, so but sorry, just want to clarify that that's not a bungalow. That two-storey house is, I think next to it is a garage.
Yeah, on elevation A or B?
Elevation B.
So that's a garage. Okay.
I think so. I'm trying to double check on Street View now, but I don't think there are bungalows adjacent to the site on Pield Heath Road.
Okay. Whilst Andrew's doing that bit of research, Councillor Davis.
So just a couple of bits. Elevation A, that whole road is bungalows. So
Yes.
so that would be my concern, is that it might be a bit too big for the properties next to it, but that's just come off of Councillor Higgins' point. My point was on the demolition and construction management logistics plan. There doesn't seem to be any times for site deliveries, and if we know Field Heath Road at 8 o'clock in the morning and at 3 o'clock in the afternoon is near enough gridlocked, so is there a way we can add something that delivery times have to be out of these windows if we're mindful of the traffic in the area?
Yeah, also, just to clarify that point from earlier, that is a bungalow. I'm wrong. That one's on the right.
Okay.
I will respond initially that the hours of operation or the hours of construction are a part of what will need to be in the demolition and management logistics plan. If you would like to stipulate that those hours should be in accordance with the Code of Considerate Construction Practice, I think that's probably the best way to secure best practice, unless you're wanting to restrict actual deliveries to different hours, which would normally be sort of 8 till 6.
Do you want to come back, Councillor?
Yeah, it's my main concern would be loading and unloading of vehicles during peak times. So if we could add some restrictions in for delivery times.
Yeah, just the thought though. I mean, it's peak times is going to be 8 o'clock in the morning, and are we then saying we're going to restrict them to deliver at 10 o'clock? Possibly. I mean, I don't know what the rest of the committee feel about that. Alan, did you want to come back?
Thank you, Chairman. Condition 3, demolition and construction management and logistics plan. Point G requires the plan to submit hours of construction. So that would then be presented to officers, and we would make a judgment whether the proposed hours are reasonable outside the peak. But I've listened to what's been suggested, and I'm quite pleased to be guided by committee. I would probably say after 10 o'clock in the morning once the AM peaks died down.
Okay. Well, we'll see what other
members
feel about that. We've got Councillor Bennett, then Councillor Dott.
Thank you, Chairman. So I was going to make a point around the traffic. I think we have to consider this site's proximity to Hillingdon Hospital and the fact that Pield Heath Road is frequently patronized by ambulances going back and forth, and we just need to make sure that during rush hour, as Councillor Davis says, when that road is already gridlocked with traffic, that we're not delaying ambulances getting to and from the hospital just because there's construction traffic or deliveries nearby. My other question was just around the loss of housing. So obviously we've got quite stretching housing targets as a borough. I would assume officers have balanced the benefit versus the loss of 3 properties and a B&B and conclude that additional care home is what's required. I just wanted to ask if we were comfortable with that loss, and also of the B&B and the loss of a hotel effectively, and the loss of rooms and the impact that might have on local contractors and their ability to stay in the area.
Okay. Did you want to pick those points up? Or Andrew?
Thank you.
Yeah, so I mean, you're quite right. Residential properties, we never like to see the loss unless it's replaced at higher densities. In this case, whilst they're not replacing it with C3, replacing it with C2, that is still part of the housing choice that the borough offers, and it does the equivalent of freeing up 60 homes elsewhere within the borough. So we're taking the sort of the round view that it will improve housing choice and will provide more homes for people to live in the borough.
Okay, you okay with that?
Thank you.
No worries. So it's that word again, isn't it? Balance that is going to come into this, as it does into all applications. But Councillor Dott.
Thank you, Chairman. I would like to make a point on parking. According to Hillingdon local plan, there's a 1 car parking for every 4 bedrooms, isn't it? Yeah. According to that, which makes a total number of parking is 15 instead of 14, but in report it says a 14 car parking space because there are 60 bedrooms which make a 15 car parking space.
I mean, I can cover that. Yeah, it's a shortfall of 1. It's not significant enough to cause overspill parking, which is the main reason why we attach these parking standards. And they are maximum parking standards as well, so they're just things that you can't exceed. If there's a transport justification to go underneath those standards, then we will listen to that. It's also worth noting that they've got an ambulance bay, a delivery bay. They've got over the required number of wheelchair accessible bays for a scheme of this size. And most of the residents, because they'll be receiving care, won't be driving themselves. It will be visitors and staff who we're trying to cater for with this parking area.
Does that cover that point for you? Okay. Councillor Higgins.
I don't really want to put on the floor a refusal because this is a good scheme and it's benefit to the community. And I hate to do this, as you know, but I think a site visit would be helpful on this because the relationship between that building and the bungalows is really, really important. And that hip roof is higher than any other two-storey building, which worries me a lot. And it's just that in the principle, I like this scheme. It just needs some tweaks, and I think a site visit might make the things. But that's just me. I don't have a seconder, so go from there.
Never thought I'd hear the day. But there you go. It's live on YouTube as well. Live on YouTube. Okay, so there has been some debate and some genuine concerns raised about bulk scale and mass, and I think we are moved for a site visit. Is anybody willing to agree with Councillor Higgins? Councillor Davis?
I'd be happy to second a site visit.
Okay. Right. Okay, so now we have to take a vote. So all those in favour of deferring this application in return for a site visit, can I have a show of hands, please? Oh. Those against the site visit? So, okay, and one abstention. So that's 5 for, 1 against, and one abstention. Okay, so we are deferred for a site visit. Democratic Service officers will be making the arrangements for that site visit. But to quote another chairman of a planning committee, it is expected that members do their utmost to attend. We know that people have work commitments and the like, but please try and make sure that you're able to attend a site visit, which we'll arrange sooner rather than later, as I know diaries are getting close to Christmas and the like. But also, I think it's worth. There's been some good scrutiny on this particular application, but I think if it comes to the point, I think the refusal word was mentioned. There has to be good policy planning reasons to do so. And again, as I will say, it is about the balance. It is about the balance. So we'll defer this item for a site visit, and a date will be announced in due course. Is that okay, Glenn? Are you happy with that? Good. Okay, so agenda item 9 this evening is deferred for a site visit. Okay, right, that brings us to the end of a very long major planning application committee meeting. We've had a couple of short ones in recent months, so it's about time we had a long one. But thank you very much to everybody for some very great contributions this evening. There's been a lot of good scrutiny and some good questions. And I think those people sitting at home and the people that were here earlier on will see that we do put these applications through their paces. So thank you to members, thank you to officers, and thank you to everybody who's been watching online. And we'll close the meeting. Thank you.